Vamos começar a entrevista com o professor Ilan Pappe, que é uma das principais atrações aqui da Flip e que... It's the first time in Brazil?
Second time.
Second time. And you are launching like 2 new books here?
Yeah, 2 new books, yeah.
What historical context is most crucial for understanding the current humanitarian crisis and the widespread reports of starvation in Gaza?
I think there are 2 historical contexts. One is going much back in history, and one is a more recent one. The longer historical context, so to speak, goes back to the very problem of Zionism as a European project that emanated from the fact that Europe did not know how to deal with its anti-Semitism, with its racism towards the Jews, and opted, instead of dealing with this problem, opted for the option of building a Jewish state in the midst of the Arab world at the expense of the Palestinians. And in many ways, although this happened 130 years ago, it still is the problem. It still is the problem that you insist that Palestine, that is an Arab country in the middle of the Arab world, has to be a European Jewish country. And this is part of the problem, because Zionism is still built on the assumption that the main problem for the success of Zionism is the fact that there are still so many Palestinians living in Palestine. And Israel tried all kinds of things, and that's where we come into a more recent historical context. In 1948, when Israel was established, in order to deal with the so-called Palestinian problem, Israel ethnically cleansed half of Palestine's population, destroyed half of the Palestinian villages. But still, half of the Palestinians remained in Palestine. Israel also was not happy with the borders that were formed after 48, namely Israel was without what became known the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and therefore wanted to have more territory. And in 1967 had more territory, but with more territory came more Palestinians, so the demographic issue remained. So that's one historical context, this constant inability of Israel, because of its ideology, to deal with the demographic presence of Palestinians. And they try everything, ethnic cleansing, partition, and unfortunately recently genocide. There is another context which people are not always aware of, that Gaza Strip, talking more specifically on Gaza, Gaza was not a strip before 48. It was a cosmopolitical town on the way from Egypt to Turkey. And Israel created the Gaza Strip in 1948 as a kind of a mega refugee camp. It pushed hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from the center and south of Palestine into what became the Gaza Strip. So people who live in the Gaza Strip, until 1967, they live in the biggest refugee camp in the world. After 1967, because they are the descendants of the Nakba, they are also more resistant than the rest of the Palestinians. So they are being punished all the time by Israel. So the mega refugee camp becomes, as the title of my book that appeared here in Brazil, it became a mega prison. And the mega prison also is not quiet. It resists. It reacts. And then Israel tries the blockade, the siege after 2007. And Gaza continues to resist. And when nothing works, when ethnic cleansing is not working, when prison is not working, I'm not surprised that the Israelis decided the only option we have to deal with these millions of Palestinians we don't want in Gaza is by genocide.
Okay, and given the current political climate, do you see any parallels between the events of 1948 and the situation in the occupied territories today?
There is a connection. The connection is that the problem is, again, coming back to the issue, how do you deal with massive presence of Palestinians, which you, from an ideological perspective, regard as the main obstacle for your success. There's a difference between what Israel did in Palestine in 48, what it did in the West Bank since 67, and what it's doing now in Gaza. The difference is in the means. 48 is ethnic cleansing. The West Bank since 1967, it's a very incremental, very gradual ethnic cleansing with a lot of other tactics like policing the Palestinians by not allowing them to move freely, by creating economic and military pressure on them to leave, using the Jewish settlements as a leverage against them. And then you have Gaza. When all these methods in the West Bank were not working in Gaza, they tried something different, the siege and eventually the genocide. The common theme for all of this is that the Palestinians are dehumanized. They become a problem, not human beings, a problem that has to be removed. And this includes all the Palestinians, not just those who are fighters or, as the Israelis would call them, terrorists, but everyone is a problem. A child, a baby, a woman, an old person. And what is so common to the way Israel behaves now in Gaza, to 48 and the West Bank, that Palestinian villages are not treated as a civilian space, but as military bases. And therefore you can obliterate them. And everyone who lives in the village is actually a soldier of the other side and not a civilian.
Yeah, that's the great problems. What's your feeling? How do you deal with this being considered a traitor for challenge the traditional narratives of your own people? And besides that, how has your work been received by younger generations of Israelis and Palestinians, and what gives you hope for a different future?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's not nice to be treated as a traitor. And definitely at the very beginning, I took it very hard. And it both saddened me, but also worried me, because it's not only that people call you a traitor, it comes with certain threats and risks and so on. But there is a point in history where, in your own history, where you say, I am at peace with myself, and then you can really deal with such accusation. It only troubles me that I cannot have a good dialogue with my own people, but apart from it, I don't consider it as something that would force me to change my views. As for the way this is being received, unfortunately, most young Israeli Jews are indoctrinated in a very powerful educational system, and therefore I don't think they are open enough to hear it. I'm also not allowed to enter schools in Israel and so on, so it's difficult for me to be in touch. Although I do have some influence of a younger generation, but it's a small minority, not a big one. It's a much better dialogue I have with the young Palestinians. I think there's an appreciation for the positions I'm taking. I'm not trying to replace them. I'm trying to be in solidarity with them, and I think they understand it. And I have a lot of, when you ask me about hope, it's exactly these young Palestinians that gives me hope. They give me hope, because I think they are much more united than the present Palestinian political leadership. They are much more clear about the vision for the future. And I think they're very committed and assertive and confident. And I think they're the ones who would lead the way, hopefully, for a better life for everyone in Israel and Palestine.
Great. You live nowadays for a, a long time in England, and
Yeah.
you consider yourself, or you are in fact a political exiled in London, because you cannot leave, cannot go back to Israel.
No, I can
You can't.
I can. I cannot work in Israeli academia, but I can go back to Israel, and I go back to Israel. It's my homeland. I want to be there. I have a very good connection with the Palestinian community inside Israel, and I don't want to desert them. And I do believe that you need to be there, of course, as long as I'm allowed to do it. I think it's important to talk to people. I don't give up on talking either to Jews or Palestinians inside. I don't think you can do everything from the outside. I do believe that it's important to understand what people are worried about, both Jews and Arabs. And therefore, I'm very glad that I can still do it. Of course, if I won't be allowed to do it, it would be very sad. But as long as I can, I would like to be there as much as I can.
Even to be here in this festival in Flip, you had to fight against great pressures. And
Yeah.
is like this all over
All
the
over,
world?
all over. And I'm going tomorrow to São Paulo, and I know there's a big pressure to cancel my talks in São Paulo. This happened before when I came to Brazil. It happens in every country in the world, apart from Chile, maybe. It's the only place where my talks were not cancelled. Yes, I'm used to it. It's on the one hand, it's very annoying. On the other hand, it means that people are worried that I hope they're right, that what I say can have a positive impact. So I maybe it would be far worse if nobody would try to stop you. That means that you don't have anything important to say.
You've documented what you called ethnic cleansing in 1948. And how do you respond to critics who argue this term is an overstatement and historically inaccurate?
As I showed in my book, The Ethnic Cleansing in Palestine, I took the definition of academics, of legal experts. I even took the definition of the American State Department. The American State Department website has a very clear definition of what is ethnic cleansing. And if you look at their definition, not to mention the definitions by the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, but even the American one fits really one, in every aspect, fits what happened in 1948. I think it's very difficult to argue that what happened in 1948 is not an ethnic cleansing. If it's not an ethnic cleansing, then it is what? It's a voluntary journey of Palestinians leaving their villages in which they lived for hundreds of years for no good reason. That is ridiculous. No, I think it's totally irrefutable that ethnic cleansing is the right way of looking at it. You know, people were at least at first resistance to this. Even my publisher was a bit worried about it. Now everybody admits it, and people are also using the term for explaining what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
And to the last question, you've already talked about a little bit of this, but what could you say, not necessarily hoping, not necessarily optimistic, but what can we see about the future of this part of the world?
Yeah, I think there are two things that we should pay attention. One is processes which we have no control over it. And one of the most important processes, which can be good and can be bad, is the fact that Israel from within is imploding. There's a problem inside Israel, economic, social, cultural, that will weaken Israel very, very strongly. I don't know if it will lead to total disintegration, but it would create huge problem for Israel. Now, this is good and bad. It's bad because if nothing replaces it, it can continue for many years, and like in Syria for so many years. The disintegration of Syria created a lot of violence, a lot of bloodshed. So I hope this is not the case in Israel. This is something I don't have a control, none of us, but it can create a better condition. What is more important are the processes on which we all can contribute to that can lead to a better future. For example, the solidarity movement with the Palestinians, the boycott, divestment, and sanction, the BDS movement, the fact that so many young Jews in the world don't want to be associated in Israel. In Brazil, 10, 20 years ago, there were 3 or 4 Jews who were willing to say, we are pro-Palestinians. Now there's a big movement of Jews in Brazil who are totally in support of Palestine and don't identify with Zionism. And this is happening everywhere in the world, including in the United States. And we have to look at the way public opinion influences politics. It's not a coincidence that probably the next mayor of New York, the biggest Jewish city in the world, Mr. Mamdani, is a very pro-Palestinian politician. These are indications that despite a very bad period of politics, populists, right-wing, people like Trump, Erdogan in Hungary and so on, there are signs that public opinion wants a very different kind of politics. And the different kind of politics, I think, would bring a much more courageous policies towards Israel. And we need the pressure from the outside because there's very little hope for a change from inside Israel.